Welcome back, ladies and gents, boys and girls. Today, what I will be showing you is how to utilize Hyper-V or the Hyper-V feature set on your Windows workstation to deploy a Microsoft Windows Server virtual machine inside of this Hyper-V virtualization environment, so that you can learn how to use Microsoft Windows Server, or test with it and do whatever you'd like. But we'll be creating on a Windows workstation, Hyper-V enabled desktop, a Microsoft Windows Server 2019 server virtualized. Let's do it. All right. So I have already opened Hyper-V. I will put some links in regards to how to actually get to this point. If you're starting off with a computer that doesn't have this enabled, I do have a video that shows you exactly how to enable this feature. Um, we're assuming here that you've already gone through that process, and if you still need to do that, go ahead and take a look at my how to enable Hyper-V video. So, two things that we need to have for this. We need to have the Hyper-V environment. Well, three things. First thing is we need a computer, right, that is able to or allows you to enable the Hyper-V virtualization hypervisor. This sometimes needs to be enabled in the BIOS. Most newer machines are pre-enabled in the BIOS for virtualization, so you don't have to worry about it if your machine is fairly new. But anyway, so you need a workstation, desktop, laptop. You need this Hyper-V feature set, which we already have enabled on this laptop that I'm using for this demo. And then you're going to need an image of Windows Server. In this case, I'm using a Windows Server 2019 image. I have downloaded this from Microsoft prior to this video. I'll add a link to the evaluation download from Microsoft in the description. But anyway, so here's the image. So all the three things that are required for this to work is, we have a machine, what we can use with Hyper-V enabled, and then we have the image that we're going to be creating a virtual machine from. So think of the image as like a DVD or a CD-ROM or whatever, some sort of media that you need to use to install or set up Microsoft Windows Server. That's what that image is there for. Since it's all virtual, we don't need any physical, media, disks, CDs, floppies, God forbid. Yeah. So anyway, so this is our hypervisor. This is already enabled, so we want to create a new VM. So the creation of the new VM is the same no matter what image you use. But in this case, we're going to go through it just like before from the beginning. So open up Hyper-V Manager. There are many ways. There's more than one way to do this, but the way that I want to show you here to create a new virtual machine is you're going to right-click on your computer name here under Hyper-V Manager, and you're going to select New, and you're going to select Virtual Machine. Great. So get some background info in regards to blah 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 blah, wizard and so forth. Feel free to read this or pause the video to read. All right. First thing, we need to name our virtual machine. So this is what the virtual machine is going to look like in our virtual machine list here. So for the purposes of this test, we're going to call it Windows Server 2019 Standard Jigsaw Cali. Okay. Another option here. So if we don't want to store the machine and the disks and the configuration file and so forth, everything that's needed for the VM to function, if we want to store this somewhere other than the default location that's listed here, we would check this box, and then you can browse or type in the location here. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to leave everything, with the Microsoft defaults. So we're going to uncheck that. Press Next. All right. Specify a generation. So you can take a look here, but ideally, in most cases, especially now, in 2023 anyway, you should probably almost never select Generation 1. I can't really think of a good reason to ever even use Generation 1 anymore. You get a lot more with Generation 2 virtual machines and Hyper-V. One requirement is, only a 64-bit guest operating system. 99% of machines out there now are running 64-bit. Without, a winded babble about this, we're going to select, and I recommend selecting Generation 2. Now, you can still use Generation 1, and the same process would apply, but you do get a lot more, granularity with the control and settings and so forth with your VM with the Generation 2 virtual machine. So we're going to select 2, press Next. Okay, startup memory. So this is your virtual RAM. So, thinking old school, right? We have a tower. You buy a tower, your Packard Bell tower from Walmart, and you buy it with physical memory sticks inside. If you bought this tower, it would have a 1 gig stick in it. This is what we have configured thus far. 1 gig is a little low for Windows Server deployment. We're going to start off at 4 gigs, and that actually equals out to 4,096 megabytes. This checkbox here is on by default. And what that means is that the 4 gigs that you're carving out of the system that runs this, which is this desktop here, runs Hyper-V, if you uncheck that box, that 4 gigabytes is always going to be it's only going to be available to this virtual machine. And it's always going to use 4 gigs, even if it doesn't need 4 gigs all the time. If you leave the default option for dynamic memory, what this means is that you limit the virtual machine to 4 gigs. However, it's not necessarily going to use 4 gigs all the time. If the machine is just sitting there idly and not doing much, it's going to use much less memory, which frees up the memory for you to use on your workstation here that you're using to create the virtual machine. Anyways, yeah, most of the time I highly recommend using dynamic. And dynamic is enabled by default, so we're going to go ahead and press next. All right, this is our networking, configure networking, right? So by default, when you set up Hyper-V, you get a default switch. A default virtual switch, what that does is it actually, it's like a switch, like a physical switch you would plug in Ethernet cables into. In this case, the default switch is always connected to your virtual network interface, or I'm sorry, to your network interface virtually on the desktop or server or wherever you're running this Hyper-V feature. Hyper-V Manager. So by default, the default switch is going to have the same access to the network and the internet as the machine that we're doing this on or have Hyper-V installed on does. There is a lot more you can do. You can create switches that cannot get to the internet and so forth. For the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to go ahead and select default switch so we have internet capability right out of the gate. Otherwise, if we selected this, the VM we could still create the virtual machine, but it would not be connected to the internet, and there would be no enabled network interface in the virtual machine when we actually get finished with the deployment or installation. So, for the purposes of this, we're going to use the default switch. Press next. Okay. Now, so we talked about virtual memory, virtual disk, so forth. So we're back to the virtual disks, right? So just like a physical hard drive inside of a tower, right, from Walmart, you need to have a disk where you can put your operating system. Since we're dealing with hypervisor and virtualization, this is also going to be a virtual disk. In this case, by default, Hyper-V creates a name for your single virtual disk, which utilizes the name of your virtual machine. That's basically it, and it stores it in that directory that we could have changed in here. It's the default, and then the default's 127 gigs. What I like to do is actually not use this much space, because realistically, for this demonstration, we don't need 127 gigs. We could get away with 40 gigs. I'm going to leave it at 50. This 50 gigs, is taken out of the big pie, which is your desktop that runs Hyper-V. So if you have 100 gigs hard drive and that's it, and you select 50 gigs, 50 gigs are going to be used for this virtual disk. It's not necessarily going to use 50 gigs the whole time because it's also dynamic. However, be cognizant of your resources when selecting this. Now, though it says maximum 64 terabytes, if I have a 1 terabyte disk that I'm creating this VM on, and I put in 64 terabytes, the creation is not going to work because you obviously don't have the space to be able to house a 1 terabyte or 64 terabyte disk. Anyway, yeah, so 50 gigs is more than enough. You have some other options here, but for the purposes of this, we're going to create a new disk that we will want to install Windows Server onto. Press Next. All right, so we're going to install an operating system, and that operating system is going to be Windows Server 2019 Standard. This is where that image that I was talking about in the beginning of the video comes in. So we're going to select this option and click Browse. If you remember, the image was on my desktop, so I'm going to click Desktop, and here is the Windows Server 2019 1809.19 revision. It's not the newest, but fine for this video. We're going to select it, locate it, select it, and press Open. This is like our CD-ROM and what we're installing, the operating system from. This is that CD-ROM and CD or whatever you want to think of here. Press Next. All right, so this is a summary or description of all the settings that we configured. Remember our 4 gigabytes of RAM, our hard disk, and as you see, it is by default dynamically expanding. So even though I set it to 50 gigs on the actual hard drive on this workstation that we are running Hyper-V on, the footprint's going to be only as large as the utilization on that virtual disk. So if we are only using 25 gigs out of that 50 gig disk, we're only going to see that disk size to be 25 gigs. Anyway, we'll press Finish here, and the virtual machine is starting to create itself. Wow, that was fast, right? Well, yes. Are we done? Not quite, but we're getting there. All right, so this is the 2019 standard Microsoft Server virtual machine that we are creating, right? So after we've gone through the configuration process, we see it here in the list. In order to continue, we're going to either right-click and press Connect. You can select it and then press Connect over here. What I normally do is I double-click, and that does the same thing. It opens up the VM box here, and we're going to press Start or press the power button here. And sorry, folks, it looks like I'm losing my voice for some reason. All right, so we're going to press any key. Oh, I missed it. So if you ever want to restart a VM, Control-Delete works just like it does in a regular computer, physical computer. I'm going to press Control-Delete, and then I'm going to press any key as soon as that press any key to boot from that disk shows up. We're going to select Windows Setup, press Enter, and as we see, the files are being loaded. This is basically what you would see if you had a monitor and a desktop tower or a server that you're standing in front of physically, and have like a CD-ROM or USB flash drive connected to, and you're installing the operating system from it. This is literally the same thing, except it's all virtualized. Technology is awesome, right? All right, so regular Windows setup screen. There's not much. I'm going to leave the language as English, the time and currency as English, and US. Whatever your application may be, you might need to change this. Well, I'm going to press Next. We're going to select Install Now. Okay. So the setup is starting, and this is all running, our virtual machine and that ISO or disk image that we attach to the virtual machine as, like a virtual CD-ROM or DVD or whatever you want to call it. Cool. All right. So with this image, we actually have 4 options of the operating system we can install, and I'll explain the differences here. So it's all going to be Server 2019. Standard and Data Center are the 2 revisions. So Data Center is much more expensive, where Standard is less expensive. Data Center gives you a lot more, like licensing and etc. If you want to, set up a server with Data Center, you don't necessarily have to get a license for every VM that you run. For the purposes of this video, we're not going to use Data Center, although we could. We're going to use Standard. Now, why are there 2 standards? Why are there 2 data centers? As you see here, one has desktop experience and one does not. If I were to select this instead of this, no desktop experience means that there is no desktop experience, meaning that the way that you can interface with the server is not going to be via the graphical interface. It is mostly going to be via PowerShell or via some administrative tools on another machine. This is actually a very good idea. A lot of times, since it reduces the security footprint of your server, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to actually want a graphical interface, so we're going to select desktop experience. Pressing next. All right. As always, you have to agree to the terms. Read through those, and then we're going to accept them and press next. All right. Here, we're not going to upgrade anything. We're creating a new VM, so we are going to select custom, install Windows only. We're going to select a disk, which is the only disk that we have, and this is that 50 gig virtual disk that we created just a little while ago. We're going to press next. And we're going to hurry up and wait. All right, so if you've installed Windows virtually or on a physical machine with a CD, like I said, you should be familiar with this Microsoft Windows installation screen. Now, because the system is virtualized, this process normally, depending on the hardware and all, and so forth, but um, virtual installations usually go way faster, and of course, depending on the hardware and so forth, but way faster than the equivalent installation would be on a physical box. So, as you can see, we're at 5%, and it actually usually ramps up speed or ramps up percentage points. The higher it gets a little faster, or at least that's what it looks like to me always. At this point, we don't have to do anything. We need the installation or the Windows setup installing Windows process to run all the way through. So we just hang out and do whatever we want to do, except press that red X or any of the X's on the screen and just leave it up here. And we have a couple of minutes to just kind of hang out. You're more than welcome to watch or skip ahead. But yeah, this part is mandatory. So files are getting prepared for the installation. Next, we're going to have installing features, installing updates. If we select that, and then we'll be wrapped up. But again, VirtualBox here, and I don't know if you've installed off of a physical media onto a physical host on like a spinning hard drive in the last 20 years. You know how long this used to take. And virtualization makes it much, much faster. So we're only working with virtual disks and CDs and so forth. So there is an SSD in this laptop that I'm using for the demo. So it is not the fastest machine by any means, but it is fairly modern with some modern components. So this is going a little bit faster than it would with an equivalent machine with a spinning hard drive or a hard drive that is not an SSD, a solid state disk. All right, and change the focus a little bit so we're only focusing on our VM here, and just waiting for this getting files ready for installation. Task is completed. We're almost at 60%, so we're more than halfway through, and we'll be done momentarily, folks. So just hang tight. Getting close, almost at 80%. Come on, baby. All right, 92%. Almost at 100. Now this is not the final task, so we're getting close, but we're not quite done yet. Let's see what the rest of the installation looks like time-wise. As I mentioned, time may vary. Just like objects may appear smaller or larger in the rear view mirror. Anyway, really bad joke, but that's how it goes. All right. And it appears like we're stuck at 96%, but we're really not. As you see, it's moving forward. But for some reason, sometimes 1% takes much longer than another 1% increment. Come on, we're so close to getting ready. We're going to hurry up and wait. But we'll still be moving on here shortly. 100%. Cool. And as you see, like 3 out of 5, right? Installing features is done. Um, Installing updates is next, and finishing up is basically not a task. It's literally just a screen telling you that you need to restart and we're done, as you shall see here momentarily. All right. Still hurry up and wait, folks. All right, so that is done. We're waiting for the last task in the creation setup process here. And as I mentioned, this is not even really a step. As you will see here, once we get there. Yeah, like I said, I mean, now the only thing that's going to happen is Windows needs to restart. So you can press restart now if you don't want to wait the 10 seconds. If you don't do anything, it just restarts anyway. So there we go. Our new virtual machine is restarting to get to the next step of the installation process. And this shouldn't take very long. Again, we're working with virtual servers. So as you see, the loading spinning wheel there. Hyper-V logo. In case you guys forgot, that's what we're using is Hyper-V. Microsoft did not want us to forget. So yeah, you can think of this part as like your brand new Microsoft Windows Server out of the box loading for the first time. And as you see, starting services, getting devices ready, etc., etc., etc. Right? We shall be done soon enough here. Just at the last stretch. And guess what? You know, at the end of the tunnel, there's a Windows Server operating system. And for you, ladies or gentlemen that are maybe just starting out or trying to learn technology in regards to virtualization, I mean, this is kind of exciting. It was exciting for me. First time I got to build a virtual machine years and years ago, um, and I haven't really stopped building them since. But anyway, yeah, so instead of sitting there in some hot server room or maybe a basement or maybe your bedroom, whatever, or with a floppy disk or a CD or external hard drive, whatever, and a loud physical server tower. This is all we have to deal with here. Just a virtual, not loud, no floppies or physical disks. Everything is done inside of your workstation operating system. So, and we're almost done here, folks. Bring us back here to the full desktop view. Boom. Okay. So first question from the first thing we need to do is set the administrator password here. You cannot do the same trick you can with Windows 10 or 11 where you don't type in a password, and press finish and it bypasses all that stuff. We do have to create a password here, so I'm going to create one. And I'm going to type it in twice and press finish. Finalizing your settings. Starting to look like a server, right? A little bit. Now, while this is loading, the main question people always ask me, right? So we have a laptop, right, that we're using here for this demo that we have enabled Hyper-V virtualization on, right? Okay, great. So that means we can create virtual machines inside of our laptop, right? Okay, so we've done that. Now we created a Windows Server 2019 standard, almost, virtual server on our laptop. Most people want to know is if they can set up Hyper-V inside of that server and then create another server inside of that VM. If anyone saw the movie Inception and got confused by it, that's basically the same thing. Is one server inside another server inside another server. So no, you cannot actually nest deploy virtualization like that with Hyper-V, where you would have Hyper-V installed on a laptop. Then you would create this VM. Inside the VM, you have another Hyper-V installation or a feature being enabled, and then another VM inside of it, and so forth. Um, in this case, you can use one level nesting where you start off with Hyper-V, and then you can create a VM from there. You can enable all the other features inside the server operating system, except for running more virtual machines inside of this virtual machine. I don't know why everyone asks that, but I guess I do know. It's kind of like an obvious question. Microsoft did think of that, so yeah, you cannot have another VM inside of a VM, at least with Hyper-V. All right, so if you watched my Windows 10 video, Windows 10 VM creation video, this is the same thing. So in this case, I'm going to actually click on Connect. If you're familiar with remote desktop, this is essentially like a like a piece of that remote desktop connection interface. You can use both monitors or just one monitor to connect to this virtual machine. I'm just going to leave the default and use one monitor and press Connect. And this is going to connect to our new VM via remote desktop protocol versus just running directly out of Hyper-V. There's some benefits to it. I encourage you to play around and see. But anyway, we're at the login screen for our server, right? So what's next? Let's log in. Put in the super secure password I used here and press the enter key. Okay. And if you're familiar with server 2016 and up, this should be some very familiar to you as far as logging in. Obviously, the server is not on any domain. It's a standalone virtual machine. Doesn't mean you can't create a domain or a domain controller out of this server and then have other servers sign into the domain and so forth. But for the simplicity of this exercise and demo, we're just logging in with the local administrator account that we created as a last step of our deployment just a couple of minutes ago. Pretty sure you guys are there. Remember? All right, I'm going to stop with the bad jokes. All right, so we have now booted to a desktop environment of our Windows Server 2019. First things first, I want to point out something. So, well, yes, we're going to say yes. We want the server to be able to be discoverable on our network. In our lab here, server managers automatically coming up. One thing that's something to take a look at or watch out for, like in this case, I'm actually located in the Central Standard Time Zone. And for some reason, I've noticed that a lot of these server deployments usually want to select or stay select. They select the. This was not an issue with Windows 10 Workstation. Select the Pacific Time Zone as opposed to the Central Time Zone where I am located anyway. So one of the first things I do is just go in here, right click on the clock in the taskbar. You go to adjust time. We're going to get a settings pane here where we can change that and fix the time because the time is actually 7:51 p.m. where I am at. So instead of, and as you see, it's Pacific. I'm in the Central Time Zone, so all we do is scroll down to Central Time, select it, and boom, our time is now correct. That's all. Now, we have created our Windows 10 virtual VM. I'm going to show you a couple of things real quick. Obviously, this is our server manager. We can do a lot of stuff there. Look out for some other videos I'll be putting out in regards to adding features and doing stuff in here. But in regards to the virtual machine, so if you recall that ISO, which was our virtual CD, DVD, media, whatever you want to call it, this is it right here. It's actually attached. It looks like a CD drive or a DVD drive rather in this case with the letter D. So it is still attached to the server. We can detach it by simply right-clicking and pressing eject, like you would, on any other machine. And it's gone. If we go back here, there's no more disk on the DVD drive. Our C drive, we specify 50 gigs, and it's just right about there, 49.3. One other thing here is we're going to right-click on this PC and go to Properties, just to show you a little bit. And we had, I think, 4 gigs I selected for this one. Right now, that's all we're using. So whatever we're using is going to be displayed here. and Windows is not activated because it isn't. And you can see here our server edition is 2019 standard. So if you wanted to activate Windows, I mean that's a whole different story. I'll put a link to the evaluation download for a Windows Server from Microsoft, or you can get a key, and I think it's 180 days is evaluation period with Microsoft for server operating systems. Anyway, for the simplicity of this exercise, all in all, we started off with a laptop with Hyper-V installed. We downloaded or obtained an image of Server 2019 standard and data center installation media, and went ahead and utilized Hyper-V, the Hyper-V hypervisor, to set up and create a new virtual machine that runs Windows Server 2019, which is this guy here. Anyway, thank you for coming along and watching and listening to me babble. Try to make this as quick and easy and as interesting as possible. However, I love comments. Please like, comment, let me know what you like, what you hate, why you don't like me, whatever else. I'll try to be as accommodating as I can. But if you came and you liked the video, please subscribe, like. Putting out way more videos very soon. So, feel free to request or just, don't forget about the comments. All right, boys and girls, thank you very much, and we'll see you later.